As a real estate agent, you never really know who you're dealing with. She could have been an actual billionaire. She could have been a scam artist, and I would never know the difference.
This project is kind of like a Robin Hood project. I pretended to be a billionaire so I can get into the most exclusive apartments in New York.
We're not just selling a building. The reason why people are living here is because of the lifestyle that we're offering.
85 million, 10 million, 16 million.
These people are the 1% of the 1%.
I think it's really obscene that these buildings exist.
Your maid will be getting ready with dinner while you're just having one of the finest champagnes in a soaking tub with your husband. Imagine waking up every morning to these views. Gabriella, I really see you living here.
The cheapest property I've been to was 10 million, and the most expensive was 85 million. They manipulate the cities to the disadvantage of everyone else in the cities. My name is Andi Schmied, and in 2016, I spent 3 months in New York at an artist residency program. Basically, this whole idea started with the biggest cliche that I went up to the Empire State Building and I saw the views, and I basically realized that there are lots of buildings that are as tall or even taller than the Empire State Building. And I just basically was really curious about what the view from those buildings look like. That's when I started to work on my book and my project. I chose 25 buildings, high, ultra luxury towers.
93 stories above the city, this is what $81 million gets you. A full penthouse, 8,400 square feet, with floor-to-ceiling views of a metropolis.
My goal was really to show those views that are considered to be the best views you can privately own in New York. First, I really just wanted to photograph the views for the book. As I was going deeper and deeper in this world, it became more and more obvious that it's like something totally bizarre and crazy. I was laying in bed, and really I was just thinking, how could I get in those buildings? I remember I told about the project to the curator who was working at the residency, and she told me no way they would ever let you in without a credit check. The only way for that is to pretend to be a billionaire who is searching for an apartment. From the moment on that I started to work on the project, this was pretty much the only thing I could think about. Write it down, check the address, go home, check if there's any real estate available, call the agency, and usually next day go and see it and take a picture of the view. And so really for 3 months I was living in between this Gabriella, which was my billionaire persona, and myself back and forth on the A line from Brooklyn to Manhattan.
My name is Daniel Rosenstein. I've worked in real estate for 4 years. I met Andi 2 years ago when she was infiltrating New York's most exclusive properties. I was doing Airbnb in my apartment in the Upper West Side.
And first I remember that he asked me, what are you doing in New York? And when he said he's a real estate agent, I was actually a bit hesitant to tell him what I came here for.
She told me that she was making a book. So I think at first I was like, oh, is she mocking our profession? I'm just a pawn in your project here. And then the more she was talking about it, the more I saw her point of view, which is almost nobody has access to these apartments. You have to go through a doorman, you have to reach out to a real estate agent. It's not a normal real estate market where you can show up to an open house. She asked a few questions, I think how to navigate getting into buildings. I told her to use the term, we're looking for a pied-à-terre or second home in the city. A lot of really wealthy people look for second, third, fourth, fifth homes, and she at that point had essentially created her whole persona.
Gabriella is my actual middle name because at the beginning I didn't know if they would check my passport ever. And actually at some of the properties they did check it. And I remember back then I got really obsessed by many of these small details, that I need to do my nails and I need to have proper shoes, proper bag. In order to do this project, I needed to bring my camera. and photograph the view. This made me obviously very unusual in the eyes of the agents, but I also realized that the stranger I act, the more convincing it is that I'm actually a billionaire and I just don't give a shit. I was really, really nervous at this very first viewing. The agent started to ask me if I have a chef, if I have a nanny, if we have private chauffeur. So I just randomly answered yes and no. And all of these answers kind of became part of what Gabriela was.
Tell your husband every morning that this is really where you want to be.
There are a few different types of agents. There are the ones who are kind of like very natural and just showing you, here is the kitchen, here is the bathroom, this is the price. And there is the complete other end of the spectrum.
You will feel, Gabriela, it is like going on a journey from the sidewalks of 19th century old New York to the sidewalks of Florence.
I actually might just prefer the 21st century.
So imagine your daughter running around saying words in Hungarian.
It was really hard to kind of like keep a straight face in those viewings. I mean, it was like really bizarre what they were telling me.
Sit down, Gabriela. It really is a moment for you. Just tell your husband he loves you and he wants you to be happy. I'm sure he will not say no to you if you let him know this is really your first choice.
Listen, there's a good chance somebody's trying to hack your website right now. You gotta make sure you're covered. I'm talking about enterprise-grade security built into your site and fully managed for you. Check this out. First up, prevention. The Wix platform is secure by design. Security experts are in the dev process, performing threat modeling, penetration tests, and designing code reviews. And you get a strong encryption for your data in transit and data at rest. E-com sites? Wix is compliant with the highest level of PCI DSS. And it doesn't stop there. The top international privacy and security regulations, they're all in place. You see, it's all about staying ahead of the game with real-time detection. Wix security never sleeps. Never. 24/7, 365. The Security Operations Center is on a mission to monitor and hunt down threats. Plus, anti-DDoS protection, data analysis, machine learning. And let's not forget, the #1 rule in cybersecurity is nobody is 100% unhackable. That's why Wix goes all out with a bug bounty program for independent security researchers, aka ethical hackers. And that's not all. It's time for response. Even in the unlikely event of an extreme situation, your business stays up and running. The IR team gets it done. They're trained to act fast, and there's a BCP for reliable continuation and smooth recovery. So look, you take care of business. Security's on Wix.
Because this ultra-luxury segment of the real estate is actually now not really going that well. The newer the development, the crazier the amenities they have, because there's really this like huge competition. One of the things that became an absolute standard for these buildings is the golf simulator room. Michelin-starred private restaurant in the building, theater, swimming pool, obviously.
Equinox gym, they have children's playroom, a billiards room, a conference room, and everything in between.
In one of the penthouses, it was that they would give you a yacht as a present when you buy the apartment, a yacht.
So you mentioned the number of people who are actually living in poverty according to the federal poverty numbers. But we all know living in New York, it's a whole different ballgame.
The average rent across the city has returned to nearly pre-pandemic levels.
We built fewer homes in the 2010s than in any decade going back to the 1960s.
I think the way poverty is usually portrayed is from the bottom. So you talk about homelessness or you talk about people who cannot afford housing. I think when you see it from this like very top of the sphere, it somehow is also very telling. The buildings that you can see from every single corner of the city are these ultra-luxury real estate, which are not accessible for anyone, really. Apartments and buildings are standing 60 to 70% empty.
commercial and residential wonderland featuring some of the city's tallest buildings and most expensive restaurants and condos.
If you are looking to call Steinway Tower home, studios start at $7.7 million.
Listen, not to be not sympathetic to the homeless, but if you live in 157, you're paying millions of dollars to live there. Do you want a homeless shelter in your building? I don't think so.
We are not building enough housing for everybody who needs a place to live.
Here's what it's like living in the smallest apartment in New York. Wherever your expectations are, lower them.
So these buildings are kind of really soulless in a sense. They are super standardized.
The trends that I see in these properties are a lot of the same finishes and materials used. Some of the floor plans are the exact same. I think it's a really challenging task to create something different when you're working with essentially the same floor plan, which is a tall square or a rectangle in the sky.
Oh wow, who was the interior designer?
Deborah Burke. There is no one better in design at the moment.
So you have always just some very special type of marble in the apartment that the agents would always highlight.
The marble is Siberian, which is now the best on the market.
Then you would have the oak floor, which is always the best type of oak floor. And there's like really nothing that would make any of these buildings stand out, to be honest. But it's not really surprising when you realize that it's solely a form of investment, most of the cases. So it's really not about living, and it's not about having a soul. And it shows. It's really obvious when you are there. One of the most striking things was how agents are trying to always go out of their way to tell me that no one else lives in these buildings, that I'm not going to have any neighbors.
A lot of these Billionaire road towers are investments for overseas and local people. So they'll rent them out or they'll just own them, have them sit empty for a number of years and resell them. It's a safe investment, it holds value over time, but what that translates to is buildings sitting empty. There's a trickle-down effect, so once the hyper-expensive properties become even more expensive, it raises the value of everything else beneath it.
I get very often the comment that this project is kind of like a Robin Hood project, in the sense that I'm getting the views which other people or most people cannot see to the public. And it's like being so high up, it's cool. But then it didn't feel good to be there, in a way. Or one of the very big problems of these buildings, they are casting sometimes hundreds and hundreds of meters of shadows, for example, over the Central Park or over other people's up until then sunny living rooms, or just over the streets. And so somehow these buildings that are not even lived in are taking away such natural things from the rest of the city as sunlight.
There's a lot of money in New York, and I think there will always continue to be a lot of money in New York. I do think it's going to be more segregated.
What I've learned from this project is really just how obscene differences are in society, I guess, and how this can translate into this like very literal physical form in the city, and how that is impacting everything around it.